Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Universities of Alberta's 2025 International Week. My name is Dr. Karim El-Basyouny. I'm a professor of transportation engineering, and I'm thrilled to be here today to host this session. With me, I have Marina Aziz, a master's student in my research group. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're situated on Treaty 6 territory, traditional lands of First Nations and Métis people. The University of Alberta respects the sovereignty, lands, histories, languages, knowledge systems, and cultures of First Nations, Métis, Inuit nations whose presence continues to enrich our vibrant community. For 39 years, International Week has provided a forum to share ideas, inspire discussions, and animate debates on current global issues and solutions required to create a better world. In today's session, Marina and I will discuss transportation as it relates to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. For the question and answer portion of our event, we will display a short URL, menti.com, that's MENTI.com, and an 8-digit code that should pop up on the screen here any second. If you'd like to submit questions, please go to menti.com from the device, any device, and input the 8-digit code to do so. You do not need an app or an account to actually use the URL, so you're good to go on that. Our behind-the-scenes moderator will receive your questions and put them in queue for us to answer. And with that, maybe we should get going.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karim, for inviting me to talk to you about sustainable transportation. It's a very big topic, and I'm happy we get to go through it together.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Marina, for soldiering on and joining me in this conversation.
Oh, of course. So first question for you. So why did you get into transportation?
Well, that's a great question. And I think when I look at the professions overall, when I was deciding on which career path would I pursue, I was really intrigued by the fact that transportation engineering is one of those professions, maybe few of those professions, that you're able to combine public health, economic mobility, climate change, as well as a huge impact on quality of life. With that, I think, it's also something that we all are part of. Everyone and anyone is part of the transportation system. And with that, I wanted to kind of tell you a little bit about what is transportation engineering, because I think that's important. And I think the best way to explain transportation engineering is to walk you through a bit of a story, right? And until last night, I sat to kind of put together some of what is transportation engineering in a story format. And I used ChatGPT to help me kind of create some of that. So with the help of ChatGPT, I created the following narrative, and I'd like to share it with you and sort of help you kind of get a sense of what is transportation engineering. And so I'll just go through it and I'll read it very quickly. It's very brief, 2 minutes maybe. So as you're sipping on your coffee and looking at the window, you're watching the snow flakes blanket the streets, a reality that we are all experiencing today. You realize that overnight snowfall has probably going to impact your commute. Safety is your first concern, right? You're thinking about how am I going to be moving around the city? How accessible will be some of the roads, right? And so, with safety being your concern, you think about your past historical experience with the city of Edmonton, efficiently clearing the snow off the roads, making sure that they're back in good operational shape. The main roads, the key transit corridors are being plowed and salted, ensuring that this will be a safe conditions for the early day commuters. So you start beginning to plan your morning. So you're going to be dropping off your kids at school. You probably need to get to work around 9:30. You're checking your phone to see which is the fastest way. Google is helping you with that in terms of like what path, what routes do you want to choose. And then the city has that interconnected system where it's actually providing information around the mobility around the network. So all of that is helping you in your planning. So you're also thinking about what are you going to do in lunchtime, right? And so you have that 1 hour, and you have maybe your suit. You want to go and pick up your suit from the dry cleaners, and you're thinking, okay, where I dropped it off, it's close to where I work. I'll just walk, use the pedway system, get to where I can pick up my suit. So you're making all of these sort of decisions, right? And you're thinking about the modes that you're going to be using. You're thinking about the facilities. Your decisions are being impacted by events that maybe are outside of your control, like weather and traffic, right? But all of those sort of principles are rooted, and these are the sort of technologies and scientific principles that we use to design, operate, and maintain our transportation infrastructure. So I just wanted to maybe put that into the context, is that transportation engineering, in its very simple definition, it's about the technology, the application of technology and scientific principles that would allow you to effectively design, plan, design, operate, and maintain your facilities for different modes. And your goal is to create a system, our mission is to create a system that is safe, first of all, because without safety, there isn't really anything else worthwhile. So safe, but it has to also be efficient. It has to be rapid. It has to be convenient. It has to be economically sustainable. It has to be environmentally friendly. So you have all these different other goals that you're also trying to kind of put together. So that's sort of the reason why I personally got into transportation. I'm now interested maybe around your choices and why you've decided to join transportation.
Oh, of course. Like you said, transportation touches the aspect of everyone's life. It's how you get to work, how you move, how you do all these things. But what really drew me in was actually more of a personal experience, is that I've witnessed, the unfortunate reality of how a collision can impact a person's life and the lives of their loved ones. And so that really drew me in was the transportation safety, because everyone in some aspect is vulnerable. And I went in because I wanted to try and make people feel more safe when they're going about their daily lives. But knowing that the transportation field overlaps with many other aspects, like quality of life, like you mentioned, public health and whatnot. So can you explain how transportation connects specifically with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So transportation, in my opinion, is like this thread that weaves through so many of those sustainable development goals. So we'll call them DGs for now, just for simplicity purposes. And I wrote some of them down here just so that I would be able to remember them in our conversation. So the first one is SDG 9, which focuses on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And when you think about them, without a reliable transportation system, you're not going to be able to connect those communities. You're not going to be connecting those industries. And so, you think about economic corridors and what they are allowing us to move goods, people, and services between cities, across different provinces, and even across borders. Then there is SDG 11, which speaks to sustainable cities and communities. And when you think about that in transportation, I'm thinking of vibrant public transportation systems, safe bike lanes. So those are kind of more inclusive and create more inclusive and livable spaces. And of course, you have SDG 13, which is climate action. And unfortunately, transportation contributes about 20% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. So the new trends that we're seeing in terms of electrification, investments in low carbon solutions are all going to be, I think, critical towards tackling the climate change.
No, it's a very good overview. And I think a lot of people don't actually realize how interconnected it is. Like, it's quite, at surface level, it's just, you get in my car, go to school, go to work, go to wherever, right? But it's really that the cleaner air, like you mentioned, that using electrification and newer technologies to reduce our greenhouse gases. If you have cleaner air, it means better public health and whatnot. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think a good example, actually, it's a classic example, is the Netherlands. Is their massive bike infrastructure and all that they have. What do you think?
Well, I think it ties down to that SDG, good and health and well-being. And the Netherlands is a classical example. I think the last time I checked, the statistics were that maybe, 27% of all the trips in Netherlands were made by cycling. That's a very large market share or a mode share. But when I think about this, I'm thinking about, well, what are some of the positives that we're seeing come out of that? Obviously, lower carbon emissions, but the thing that maybe a lot of people are not maybe keeping track of is that those are trips that are now being made in a more healthier manner, right? And so I think statistics there show that they not only do have reductions in emissions, but they also have sort of like boosted their public health. And I think that's sort of the kind of another added value of moving towards maybe more of a health conscious decisions when you're making your choices around modes of transportation.
Yeah. I also heard that in Austria they have something called a Kilma ticket, which is basically a pass that uses that you can use their public transit system anywhere in the country. And it might not be cycling, but I think it's you still have your first mile, last mile. You need to bike or you need to walk or whatnot.
Absolutely.
And it's a pretty big. It's a smaller sort of policy shift, but it has a really big mindset impact. Is that's what people first think about is using public transit. But that's globally. So what else do you think kind of helps us in terms of sustainable transportation? Like what gives you hope? What gives you
Well, that's a great question. I think on the global stage, there's a lot of stuff that we can be very optimistic about. And it's not restricted to one particular region. I think across all continents, you're seeing investments being made to help sort of push forward some of those objectives that have been indicated by the United Nations. Just some examples, and I notched that some of that down. In Japan, for example, you see investments in high-speed rail, and public transit, much like in Singapore and Korea. There is a huge number of initiatives that are focused on carbon neutrality or zero emissions, or investments in maybe bus rapid transit systems. So I think across the board, everybody's realizing that things need to change. And perhaps one of the biggest takeaways from when we experienced COVID was that how managing traffic or managing demand can have a huge impact on all of those sort of transportation impacts or outcomes in terms of congestion, safety, pollution, noise, right? When we all were at home and we're not making those regular trips to work and across, we saw quite a bit of drop in some of those indicators. And I'm not advocating that we should all be, that's not at all. We need vibrant cities, we need to be around, we need to support local businesses. But what was the takeaway is that continuing to invest in building capacity and not effectively managing demand, right, is going to be a detriment to our progression when it comes to meeting some of those sustainable goals. So that's sort of my take on this. But there's a lot, as I mentioned, there's a lot to be optimistic about.
Yeah, well, that's good news, at least, right? And the diversification of using different modes, different methods to try and, I guess, combat congestion and safety and whatnot. But so we kind of mentioned it at sort of a global scale, kind of really wide. So do you think you can maybe narrow it down to what we're doing maybe in Canada or at the U of A even on how we're contributing to global efforts?
Well, and I think we're doing a lot. And I'll talk maybe a little bit more about what we're doing here at the U of A, because we're not just spectators. I think we are very much contributors to the ongoing discussion around how to meet some of those sustainability goals. So when I look at, what kind of research that we're focused on here, and I'm just put some notes down for me so that I would kind of, and this is just from a very high level, a high abstracted sort of point of view. We're doing a lot of research around transportation safety. Obviously, my team and my group leads some of that effort, but there's other pieces around climate resilient infrastructure, transit-oriented development, sustainable road safety initiatives, automation, energy efficient systems, public health. The research that is taking place within the U of A community directly addresses all of those SDGs. And maybe last month I was in conversations around creating a focus group around transportation. And I've identified in a span of maybe like a week and a half, over 60 people who all have invested interest. And they come from all over campus, from law, School of Public Health, obviously engineering, that's where I'm from. And from medicine, like there is quite a bit of interest, and there's a lot of expertise within the U of A that is helping shape some of that discussion on the national stage.
I see. Oh, that's I didn't even know that there's that many people involved and we're trying to get involved in it.
Yeah.
But how do you think that, some of the people that are in the audience and that are kind of watching, what would you say to them if they wanted to get involved? How would you advise them?
That is a great question, and the simplest, I think, way to get involved is to kind of just look around and see what needs to change. What are some of the things that you believe in or relate to, right? And work towards making some changes. And maybe the first thing to do is to look around your community, right? And investigate what opportunities might there be within that space. I know the city has a Living Streets program that can help create vibrancy and improve walkability and within the neighborhood. But these are the sort of things is you need to kind of start small and think big, and I think over time that change is going to happen.
I see. Well, that's really good advice, and based off of that, just off the top of my head, I know that there's a few clubs at U of A that also kind of center around sustainable transportation, at least from what I know in engineering.
Yes.
There's EcoCar and Solar Car. Both of them use sustainable energy. So EcoCar uses hydrogen gas to fuel a custom-built, student-made car, and I believe Solar Car repurposes an already gasoline vehicle to run off of solar energy, and they both, as far as I know, they both run and they both work. And I think it's just in that way is just students that have very limited technical knowledge. They're able to do these things, and then if a student can do it, imagine what partnering with other industry members and researchers and professionals. I think it's very inspiring and bright.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's one of the things that students should be looking into, these sort of experiential learning opportunities, whether it's through a student project or a student club. I know the University of Alberta also runs a sustainability living campus.
I think so.
Something program like that, where the university wants to sort of explore some of these ideas and concepts.
Yeah.
So there's lots of opportunities within your local communities or around the university for you to contribute.
Yeah, that's amazing. What keeps you inspired? What keeps you going? You said what got you into it. What keeps you going in it?
Honestly, it's the people. It's the colleagues that I work with. It's the students that I get to partake in the journey of discovery, right? I am inspired by some of the groundbreaking work that is happening across nationally and within the U of A. In engineering, we're all about problem solving. Like we look for these complex, big issues and what I really love about engineering, and specifically the area that I work in, which is transportation safety, is that sort of what I said is that nexus between social implications, technology, and engineering. And that's really key to me because I want to be grounded. I want to make sure that my work ends up being applied, can have an impact, can change, and hopefully save lives. So that's sort of where I draw most of my inspiration, is just the people that I work with. And knowing that a lot of the work that we do at the U of A is actually translated into a policy and evidence-based decision-making that the city and other partners around Canada has been using.
Wow, that is very inspiring.
Thank you.
But maybe could you list some examples maybe about sort of the local solutions you have in mind and sort of how you've made an impact, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. I think over the years, I'm very proud of the collaboration that I've had with the City of Edmonton, and we are kind of working together on achieving Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is 0 fatalities and 0 major injuries over the next decade or so. To think about this, we kind of, that's the goal. That's not an aspirational goal. That's a goal. Like when you ask anybody who in your household, what's the goal for your household? The goal is zero. Nobody should actually lose their lives as a result of making a trip to a grocery store or going to work. And so the question now is, how do you, working backwards, how do you achieve that? Like what needs to change culturally, from a design perspective, from a planning perspective? And a lot of the work that we've done with the city around speed management, whether it's related to automated enforcement or speed limits or school zones, to digital feedback signs, which is the infusion of technology, or other design elements like scrambled phase introduction, right? These are all different kinds of collaboration that we've had with the city, and we're very proud to have been part of that journey with them, and to see Edmonton grow to being one of the most safest cities in Canada. But most importantly, we were one of the, I think, only few to achieve the United Nations goal of reducing or getting close to 50% reduction in fatalities by 2020. So it's been a journey. We've been doing it for a long time, but it's really where I also draw a lot of inspiration. Yeah.
Wow. No, I guess you can really see, when you say it, you can see where in Edmonton your work has actually been put in, and it must be very rewarding.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, it's about following a scientific approach, right?
Yeah.
And so the question is always, well, you're impacting my commute, or the speeds are maybe not right for maybe that location, and there is going to be those one-offs potentially. But I think in the grand scheme of things, when we look holistically, and that's sort of the lens that we're able to provide working with the city, is that when we evaluate the change, like in terms of outcome and impact, we're seeing substantial improvements. Like we didn't improve, our safety record hasn't improved on its own. It's improved because of these sustained initiatives that we've collaborated on over the years.
Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Do you have any questions? I'm starting to run out.
Yeah, I have one, and that's perhaps related to wanting to hear from you a little bit about being a young professional, and you're starting your career in transportation. And so what do you hope the field will look like over the next 10 years?
It's mostly to build off of what you've said earlier, is that, incorporating technology and newer innovations, I guess, into our city so that people can move around in, safe and sustainable ways, such as BRT or bus rapid transit.
Yes.
It's kind of like the nice little hybrid in between a regular bus route and an LRT station, which is, much cheaper than an LRT station, but a bit more fast, I guess, compared to a regular bus route. And it's also just technology in general is becoming better. Like 5-10 years ago, EV technology was, wasn't the best. Some people will still say maybe it's not, but it's still improving, and it's going to continue to improve. And I think that provides a lot of hope, I think, and that there's so many different types of energy that we can utilize in our systems.
Absolutely.
And also, like you mentioned, is combining expertise from other fields. So, you have the public health, medicine, you have engineering like ourselves, and you have urban planners and city professionals, and everyone kind of working together to provide a perspective on how we can improve. And I think the diversification of knowledge and that alone kind of just helps one person expand, and helps one person, learn to appreciate other aspects of the system and the network. And I think that is very hopeful. And I think, in 10 years, Edmonton will probably not look the same as it does now, as it didn't 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
And I think it'll be very bright, very green,
Yes.
maybe smarter, if you could say. But yes, do you have any words of advice for professionals or researchers about how to integrate sustainability or equity, at least, into their work?
And I think that's key, because transportation is not just about moving from one point to the other. It's more than that, in my opinion. It's about connecting people, creating opportunities, building sustainable futures, and that's not going to happen by just focusing on the basics of transportation. I think that's more of an interdisciplinary, international collaboration. And we're hopeful because we see a lot of that happening right now. It is also important to prioritize communities engaged in transportation planning. specifically to address issues that might have not necessarily been the focal point in the past, trying to bring services to underserved population. This is going to take time. We need to get a better understanding, theoretical understanding. We need buy-ins. We need consultation. That's sort of why it's early. It's important to integrate that early in the planning process and not measure it after the fact. So I'm very hopeful. I think there's quite a bit of opportunities. Again, transportation has so many different fields and areas, and they're almost the definition itself is like a career. Right? Almost every word in that definition could be a career in its own, whether it's a career in planning, design, operation, maintenance, whether it's a career around safety, right? And what is safety in aviation, in rail, in land or road, right? So there's just ample opportunities, right? There's studying of how people make choices and what modes are they going to be using and how the environment influences that. And incentives or lack of incentives could also influence the decision making. So there's all a behavioral element to it as well that maybe a lot of people are not kind of paying attention to. And obviously, how do you do that in an equitable manner? How do you make the decisions around where you want to expand and how you want to expand, how you want to densify? All of these decisions are going to have an impact potentially. Yeah.
Thank you. I honestly, it was such a very helpful and inspiring and really opens up your eyes, this conversation, to how much transportation impacts and connects with everything. I don't have any more questions.
I don't have any more questions either. Maybe I would jump on to the questions from the audience. Would that be? All right, so we have some questions. So the first one says, and I'm not sure with the order, I'm just going to go with the one that I see on my screen. So this one says, seems from recent news reports that Albertans are interested in increased rail transportation. What would be required? What would be required for increased rail transportation to be sustainable? That's an interesting question. So that one, I don't know if I have like an answer off the top of my head there. And what kinds of rail, right? Because like traditional expansion of the network, or are we talking about maybe some new technologies, maybe like high-speed rail or something like that? Obviously, there is the traditional impacts from something of this magnitude in terms of like what kind of land might be needed, what kind of technology is going to be used to drive the locomotive around, So these are all elements that are going to have an impact. But I would imagine, and I'm not a rail expert by any means, but I would imagine that much like what we see in transport and aviation, the focus in rail might also be on that cusp of a change or a major innovation, whether it's some form of renewable energy that they're using. I'm not quite looped into the rail side of things, so I'm not sure I can provide that overarching overview. But I would imagine, depending on where and how and what technology are being used, there's ample opportunities to be more sustainable. All right, another question. Considering distances and different needs for the rural farming communities, and the lack of EVs with the capacity needed for the work that needs doing, what is being done to these goals? So this one is speaking, I think, if I understand, around the rural communities and access to rural communities, and maybe how EVs with capacity needed for the work that needs to go there. And I know a lot of research that is happening around the agriculture sector. But the issue I think at hand is, how do we provide access to rural communities overall? How do we connect goods, services, and folks to communities that are remote? Not clear about the EV challenges if we're talking about maybe how remote they are, and so the charging and the distance and all of that might need to be managed. What I know is that there has been some really high-level work around platooning, like moving trucks that are autonomous potentially, that could help with the movement of goods. And that, again, goes back to the core of what transportation is, I think. And transportation is about connecting communities and connecting us to where we have our natural resources that might not necessarily be within the urban footprint. Yeah, I'm not sure, it seems to be a challenge, but you have any thoughts around rural communities and the challenges of bridging some of those gaps?
I think that the distance is a big aspect, and that because of it's so far from, say, Edmonton, if you're looking outside Sherwood Park, maybe, because it's farther away from Edmonton, which is a bit more of has everything, I guess, in it. I guess, the commute time, they don't have as many options. They don't really have as much transit. So maybe that's what they're also indicating, that like, how can we become more sustainable? But I think it's, in terms of, I feel like city might need to densify in some areas so that it becomes a bit more, the city boundaries, I guess, aren't as obvious.
Yeah.
Maybe so then the communities are there, and then with more communities, you can have more services and amenities. But it also seems like a pretty niche question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's about the connectivity piece, and I think it ties down to maybe a question around what is the logistics of moving some of that natural resource or the agricultural products. And it could be a question of maybe setting up the right charging stations, right? And the investment that is going to be needed, and how will we justify that investment from an economic standpoint. It's an intriguing question for sure. So thank you for asking that one. There's a lot of really big questions here. All right, we have one more. What are the challenges of implementing these sustainable transport options in places like Alberta, where the population is spread out, and what can be done? And that's a great point. A lot of folks have discussed the fact that in Edmonton we have a little bit maybe of an urban sprawl, that sort of like horizontal expansion. And that maybe also, again, is a question for the urban planners out there that are maybe listening in or could probably chime in as well. Well, you have to think about the point that I made earlier, which is around managing demand as opposed to expanding and building capacity. And what we know from history is that when you build it, people will come or people will use it. And so what we have seen, for example, with the addition of the ring road. The ring road, the Anthony Henday ring road, was meant to move like the goods and services, like large volumes of around the city so that it's less congestion. But what that meant too was that now you had a large land next to a major highway, which is, when my understanding, a dream come true for developers, because now they can, buy land for cheap, develop that land for cheap, potentially start adding services. So what happens is you get in the residential. The residential needs services. They need hospitals. They need schools. They need shopping centers. And so you're starting to move a large number of trips from within the city to outside of the city. So that's sort of why over time you're getting that sort of like stretch that we're seeing and happening. And so how do you achieve some of those goals around congestion and safety and efficiency and all of that in light of the fact that you have an urban sprawl? Well, I think, again, it goes back to demand management, right? So we have the facilities, we have the roads, investments in LRT options, improving transit services, densifying some livable areas. These are options that are available to us to help with some of that sort of urban sprawl. The solution, in my opinion, shouldn't always go or move towards building more capacity. It should be more around managing demand. And there's different ways we can manage demand. It's about managing, pricing could be an option. It's about creating incentives. Like, there are different ways we could do it. And it's not necessarily just be more on the penalizing side of things. How do you see the role of self-driving cars in moving towards more sustainable transport, if any? That's a great question. And I have spent nights thinking about that. Because from what I understood reading the literature is that the self-driving cars should be more sustainable. But then other indicators seem to show that, well, the car now doesn't need to park at all. Like it can drive, it would pick you up from home, drop you off at work. There's no need for that car to actually be parked. It could be moving around and maybe running a side business if if one could think, And so the question then is, what does that mean to an already congested or at capacity infrastructure? If, like a lot of the times, the assumption is you're driving from your home to your work and the car is parked. But if all of us are at work and our cars are out there, doing like robo-taxis or something like that, that's intriguing. I'm not dismissive. I think overall, self-driving vehicles have a huge promise. I think it's very common in the literature to see that, or to read around how self-driving cars are going to eliminate the human error potential, which is going to save us quite a bit of lives, because of how 95% of all crashes involve human error. I'm not fully bought into that still. I think that there is going to be benefits, but they're going to be realized over a longer time period. And so I'd like you to imagine this with me for a second. So if we were to draw the relationship between collisions on a y-axis and age, that shape is a U shape, right? That U shape indicates that the very young, those are not really driving really well, and perhaps maybe the more older generation have an increased risk of being involved in a crash. In my opinion, we're going to draw a horizontal line to represent what self-driving vehicles are going to do. And that line could either be below the U, which means that it's safer across all ages. It could be above the U, which would be really bad for us, which means that it's actually worse than any typical driver. Or it would go through the U. So it means it's safer for those who are younger, safer for those who are maybe a little bit more older, who've lost their cognitive physical ability, but still not better than the average driver that has all of that kind of experience driving. The jury's still out. I'm not quite convinced yet. I need to know more.
I have a question though to add on to it. So say it is going through the U, and then it does, in however many years, it's in Edmonton, and there's, have to balance between, human drivers and then self-driving cars. How do you think it'll look? Like if, there's a lot of, ethical and type issues, like, if the self-driving car, there's no one in it, it hits somebody, and then, God forbid, like they're severely injured, or, they pass. What's your stance on that? Like, how do you think that any city could prepare for these types of vehicles?
Well, I mean, it's happening right now. We have self-driving vehicles on the roads. The technology exists. There's testing happening in various cities across the world. And I think it's an ethical question. I was in a presentation by Waymo at some point last year, and I proposed a hypothetical scenario to them, which is I'm in a car, and I'm going through an intersection. And the car has realized that for whatever reason, there is going to be a crash that is imminent. That's going to happen. The car is crossed. There's no fault from the Waymo car, but there is going to be a crash that is imminent. I have a bus of school children next to me, the car that is crossing across the road, and maybe a ditch on the side of the road. What is the car going to do? Like, what is the programming that is going to go into making that decision, right? Is it going to try and brake? So I think, you would think, well, utilitarian, we'll do the maximum good for the maximum number of folks, right? Or is it going to be, I am the owner of the car, so you need to protect me more than any other of the road users. So I think there is just a lot of these sort of hypothetical, ethical dilemmas that we will have to think about and consider. I honestly don't have an answer. I apologize. It doesn't look like I have lots of answers to the questions today, but the reality is, it's just how complex some of those issues are. They're not the simple, easy things. What I know, for example, as drivers, as human drivers, is we have two systems in play, right? At any moment in time, we have an intuitive system and a deliberative system. When we're driving, we're not being deliberative. Like when you wake up in the morning and you're sipping your cup of tea, looking up the weather and saying, oh, well, it's going to be cold today. And then you're making decisions around which routes and modes. Those are the deliberative systems in your mind kicking in, okay? When it comes to driving, you're not looking at, okay, I'm coming up at an intersection, there's a car in front of me, the pedestrian countdown signal is coming down, I'm doing 60 kilometers per hour, it's gonna take me, V times T, this amount of time if I react now. That's not all what you're doing. You're using your intuitive system. You're looking at, okay, I have the signal countdown time, and I know I have 24 seconds. The car in front of me is starting to brake. It's icy. I should probably brake, right? Because I'm not going to be able to clear that, like change lanes and clear that intersection. That happens in a split of a second. That decision making is happening in a split of a second. But that decision making is based on years and years and years and years of experience. Things that you've tried and been successful with. Things that you've tried and maybe haven't been very successful with. Your sense and your feel about the car, right? An autonomous vehicle that is moving on a curve and needs to maintain the speed and it's icy, and you as a driver know you need to ease off your legs off the pedal a little bit because you don't want to lose control of the vehicle. Well, guess what? I was in a Tesla just a few hours ago, and it didn't ease off. It was actually trying to make up speed because that curve was on a bit of a hill. And so for a second there, I was like, oh, the car is going to wave. We're going to lose control. Again, I'm just thinking examples of different technologies that exist. I'm not saying that, I'm not picking up on Tesla or anything. I love Teslas, by the way. But I'm just saying that there are these things that we use and cues that we have honed and skills that we've honed over years that we are able to use. And I'm just wondering where that programming is going to kick in. Like, how is that programming going to kick in? Machine learning probably could help with some of that by mimicking maybe like what is a typical driver behavior in some of that. But it's an intriguing concept for sure. Let's take one other question. I'm very curious to see how self-driving cars can adapt to Edmonton winters. Seems like most of the development is in warmer climate. Sorry. Let me read that out again. I was blocking the mic. I'm very curious about to see how self-driving cars can adapt to Edmonton weather. Seems like most of their development is going to be in warmer climates. So I'm not an expert on like mechanics and what that would look like, but I can tell you from my experiences that what self-driving vehicles rely on is a combination of sensors that is basically replacing your sensory abilities as a driver. So much like you use your eyes and sort of like inner ear balance and your sense of speed, and the vehicles is relying on sensors to make those decision making. And whether it's driving in winter or inclement weather or summer conditions, the vehicle is going to be able to detect, like as we train it because of the big data, right? And as we put them into these sort of different weather scenarios, and as we challenge the sensors, we should be able to develop the technology to a point where it should be able to navigate winter weather. I think that over time, that's not going to be an issue. What I feel like is going to be the issue is what happens when the investment in the sensors are going to be at a point where it's actually going to be more economical to, or the message would be, try and change the road because our sensors are imperfect. There's nothing wrong with the sensors. It's the roads. And you might be laughing at me thinking, well, that's never going to happen. Well, I can tell you it happened. When Ford rolled out their first vehicle, they had a lobby that basically said, our vehicles are perfect. It's the roads that are not designed for our vehicle. And so what ended up happening was trillions of dollars were invested to upgrade the infrastructure so that that vehicle would be able to use that facility. And that is the question that my research is trying to address, which is basically, how do we design for this new road user? What needs to change? Because not all of the changes are going to be, well, fix the environment. Some of those changes would be, how do you upgrade the sensors or the combination of sensors within a vehicle? And these are the kind of things that I think we're going to see more of. So we have 5 minutes, so maybe room for one additional question. By what measure is Edmonton one of the safest cities? Oh, and how is that calculated? That's a good question. Sorry, I might have maybe misled you here. I think Edmonton is safe from a road transportation track record. But what I'm referring to here is that in 2010, there was that goal to try and achieve a 50% reduction in fatal collisions. I think worldwide, there was only one city that was able to get to that target by 2020, which was, I think, Barcelona, I think. And Edmonton, I think, was the second city to achieve. We didn't achieve the target, but we were very close to achieving that target, which meant that whatever the target was, how many fatal crashes we had, we were able to cut that by half. And that's a massive achievement. The fact that we were able to pull together as a community, work with, and obviously there is a lot of praise that needs to go towards the city of Edmonton and their leadership for actually creating the programs and initiatives to improve that. And I'll give a shout out to the Safe Mobility team in the city of Edmonton for achieving this. But I think we've had a small part to play in this as part of some of the initiatives, collaborations that we did with the city of Edmonton, and I'm really proud of that record that we've achieved. So that's sort of how I'm saying that we're one of the safest. I think our record just speaks to that. Is that all the time we have?
We have a minute or two. There should be some closing remarks.
Yes, I can do that for sure. All right. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank our audience for the insightful questions. I would like to thank you very much, Marina, for joining this conversation with me. There are many more events that are happening throughout the week. I would like to draw your attention to the screening of the documentary 2040 that is happening tomorrow evening on Wednesday at the Metro Garneau Cinema. We'll be providing expert commentary on the themes of renewable energy raised in the film after the screening. Please check out the online program at uab.ca/iweek to register for that and for all of the International Week activities. Thank you again for joining us over your lunch hour. Really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Thank you.